In previous studies we have talked about the gradual transformation of Republican Rome into an empire that first subjugated the lands of Italy and then spread its influence over the entire Mediterranean. It is time to remember the formation of Rome and the oldest period of its state history. Ancient Roman Kingdom refers to the period from the date taken as the foundation of Rome, until the overthrow of the last king Tarquinius the Proud and the establishment of the Republic, also called the era of the Seven Kings. In the history of many states there is a so-called mythological period, about which too little is known because of the antiquity of events retold many centuries later. We can judge about the era of the Seven Kings only from sources created during the Roman Republic and even much later empire. However, as it is impossible to imagine ancient Hellas without the heroic epic of Homer, which tells us about the most ancient times. So the royal period of ancient Rome is an integral part of its history. The unexpected change of the socio-political system from a monarchy to a republic became a sacred legend, uniting the people of Rome all subsequent centuries. The Apennine Peninsula, located in the center of the Mediterranean Sea, has for centuries attracted people with its convenient location and mild climate. According to Greek legends, the famous Hercules visited the Italian lands, and historians speak of the Mycenaean colonization of the peninsula. It is believed that the first state on the peninsula was founded by the Etruscan civilization, which actively adopted the culture of its neighbors, the Greeks and Phoenicians. Eventually, the dominant position in the region was taken by the tribes of Italians, including the Latins. According to Roman mythology, after the events of the famous Trojan War, the ships of the fleeing Trojans led by the hero Aeneas docked on the coast of the Apennines. This is where one of the legends about the founding of Rome originates. The Trojans, tired of their long wanderings, settled in the Italian lands in the neighborhood of the Latins, and one of the local kings even gave away his daughter to Aeneas. As a result of such a favorable marriage, Aeneas becomes the next king of the Latins, as well as of the new settlers. His son Ascanius Yul moved the capital of the United States to the new city of Alba Longa, the ruins of which can still be seen to the southeast of Rome, and rallied the Latin Union around it. In those distant times, war was a very common, almost everyday occurrence, especially a war for the throne. It is not surprising that the 14th king of Alba Longa, Numitor, was overthrown by his younger brother Amulus. The new ruler, wishing to secure his power, killed his nephew, and made his niece Rhea Silvia a priestess of the goddess Vesta. From the point of view of politics, it was a very wise move, because the Vestals on the one hand enjoyed great respect and immunity, and on the other, obliged to keep virginal purity for 30 years. Violation of the vow of chastity was punished very severely, up to burial alive. Further, in full accordance with the traditions of ancient myths, young Sylvia visited the god Mars. Between them burst out a stormy passion, and after a proper period of time the Vestal gave birth to twins, Romulus and Remus. In general, there is nothing unusual in this story, as the gods of Olympus many times descended to earth and entered into a relationship with mortal women. But in this case it should be remembered that the very fact of pregnancy of a Vestal for ancient society, a terrible scandal, and the divine paternity still had to prove. Do not invite Mars personally to the priestly court to testify. However, there was a more significant complication. As we remember, Rhea Silvia became a Vestal not of her own free will, but by order of her uncle usurper, so as not to leave offspring capable of one day overthrowing the king. Angry Amulus ordered to throw the twins into the Tiber, expecting thus to end with potential pretenders to the throne. The subsequent development of this story may be known from the time of the school program. The twins survived, were fed by a she-wolf and brought up by the shepherd Fastulus. When the brothers grew up, they got even with Amulus and returned the throne of Alba Longa to their grandfather Numitor. The old king sent them to found a new colony, and as a result of a dispute over the most suitable place for settlement, Romulus killed Remus on the Palatine Hill, built the city of Rome there, and became its first king. As is usually the case when new colonies are founded, the original population of Rome was made up of criminals and exiles from neighboring Italian and Greek states. Indeed, why would a man who had a profitable farm on the shores of a warm sea abandon his great-grandfather's farm and go in search of happiness in a newly built city? As we have already said, war in those times was the most commonplace thing, and therefore the diverse and marginal inhabitants of young Rome began to actively expand its sphere of influence at the expense of neighbors, Sabines, Latins and Etruscans. Even the former metropolis of Alba Longa was captured and destroyed by the young state. Rome adopted much from its neighbors, including the tradition of royal power. However, in Rome the powers of the monarch were initially limited. The throne was not inherited, and the king was elected. This semi-republican system led to endless intrigues, conspiracies and quarrels, which eventually influenced the emergence of the Roman Republic. Romulus, grandson of Numitor, king of Alba Longa, son of Vestal Silvia and the god Mars himself, fed by a she-wolf and killed his own brother. A rich pedigree and dubious biography, which, however, did not prevent Romulus to become not only the founder of the Great Rome, but also its most famous king. At the time of Romulus to Rome joined some Etruscans and Sabines. It is believed that he created the Senate of the 100 Fathers, and divided the population of Rome into three main parts: tribes, headed by elected tribunes, Latins, Sabines and Etruscans. Each of the tribes, in turn, was divided into 10 more curiae. Curiae chose the most worthy and fearless men for public office. Noble Romans, famous for valor and wealth, were called fathers, and their descendants, patricians, obscure and poor, plebeians. The patricians occupied political, priestly and judicial positions, while the plebeians were left to farming and crafts. This social stratification persisted for many centuries, although during the late Republic the boundaries between the estates became more of a formality. There are several legends about the death of Romulus, up to his divine ascension to Olympus. However, ancient historians are much more prosaic. Plutarch does not say anything directly, making do with hints, which, however, quite clear. The upper aristocracy was dissatisfied with Romulus, and, most likely, the son of Mars was the victim of a conspiracy. A beautiful legend about sending Romulus directly to Olympus, probably, appeared later, to deflect suspicion from the patricians. Numa Pompilius, the second king of the ancient Roman state, chosen by the patricians for his wisdom and piety. Numa Pompilius was born in the year of the foundation of Rome in a Sabinian family, was married to the daughter of the Sabinian king. According to legend, after the death of his wife in the Alban Mountains, he met the nymph Egeria, who taught him lawmaking. Subsequently, his daughter Pompilia gave birth to the future king Ancus Marcius. The success of the second Roman king is difficult to overestimate. It was he who brought order in the young state, trying to accustom the Romans not only to constant battles, but also to a peaceful life. Under Numa Pompilius, a description of all the lands belonging to Rome was created. Craft shops were established and the calendar for 355 days. He also forbade human sacrifice, which the Romans still resorted to in hard times, such as during the Second Punic War. And during his reign Rome did not conduct any campaigns of conquest. Numa Pompilius died at the age of 80, was cremated, and his ashes were buried on Janiculum Hill. Tullus Hostilius, the third king of Rome, Tullus Hostilius, chosen by the patricians like his predecessor. Prior to his election, Tullus was engaged in farming, but with his accession to the throne in him awoke ambition and, perhaps, the call of blood, as he was the grandson of the bravest Roman warrior Hostilius Hostilius. As a result of war with neighbors, Tullus Hostilius was able to finally conquer Alba Longa and defeat the Sabines, expanding the territory of Rome and doubling its population. Subsequently, Alba Longa was razed to the ground. However, if the destruction of Alba Longa is recognized as a historically accurate fact, the death of Tullus Hostilius is mythologized. Fascinated by wars and forgetting about serving the gods, he angered Jupiter and was killed by lightning. Lucius Tarquinius, the fourth king, Ancus Marcius, was the grandson of Numa Pompilius. Wisdom and peacefulness. He was much like his grandfather. During his reign patronized crafts, trade and agriculture. But, unlike his grandfather, he had to get involved in a war with neighbors. Rebellious against Rome tribes of Latins, Sabines, Etruscans and Volscov were defeated in the Battle of Medulia. The army of Marcius took possession of the cities of Politorium, Telin and Ficani. Lucius Tarquinius Priscus, or Tarquinius the Ancient. Lucius Tarquinius Priscus, better known as Tarquinius the Ancient, the fifth king of ancient Rome. He was of Greek descent, and his homeland was the Etruscan city of Tarquinia. He later moved to Rome and due to his wealth and wisdom became one of the most influential men in the city. King Ancus Marcius appointed him commander of the cavalry and made him his confidant. After the death of the king, Tarquinius was able to convince the people of Rome that it was he who should take the throne. Under the new king, Rome continued its wars with its neighbors and soon became the center of the Latin Union. Tarquinius also patronized the arts, expanded the Senate to include representatives of poorer families, paved the Forum, built the Temple of Jupiter Capitolius, now better known as simply the Capitol, and built the first Roman sewer system. Servius Tullius. However, the sons of Ancus Marcius harbored a grudge against the chosen king from childhood, as they believed that the throne should have gone to them. Following the example of Romulus and Remus, who overthrew an illegitimate king, they jointly killed Tarquinius, causing outrage among both the aristocracy and the plebeians. The sons of Marcius were banished from Rome, and the throne was taken by the adopted son of the murdered king, Servius Tullius, who became the sixth king of Rome. Servius was born in Corniculus, destroyed by the Roman troops of Tarquinius the Ancient. His father was killed in battle, and his mother was captured by the invaders and became a close wife of the Roman king. Servius was a slave in the royal house, but received a good Greek education, participated in the military campaigns of Rome, and Tarquinius gave him his second daughter. Here we must necessarily note that in such ancient times the institution of slavery looked quite different than in the late Roman Republic or Empire. Personal dependence was not something shameful. Slaves were rather junior members of the family, not talking tools. The new ruler celebrated the beginning of his reign with another victory over the Etruscans and the building of the Temple of Diana on the Aventine Hill. The city had grown so strong that its neighbors were in no hurry to go to war with Rome, and the new king had plenty of time to make reforms. Servius Tullius introduced plebeians into the Roman community, divided the population into 5 classes according to property value and replaced tribes with territorial ones, 4 urban and 17 rural. The new king bought the poor out of slavery and in every possible way contributed to the welfare of the people of Rome, for which he was especially honored by the plebeians, but disliked by the patricians and the Senate. Lucius Tarquinius, the seventh and last king of Rome, Lucius Tarquinius, nicknamed Proud, was the son of King Tarquinius the Ancient. When his father was killed, he was still an infant. Servius Tullius, in order not to repeat the fate of his predecessor, tried in every possible way to favor Lucius and his brother Arun to himself and gave out for the descendants of Tarquinius his daughters. However, Lucius, in collusion with the Senate, first killed his brother and his wife, and then massacred Servius, declaring himself king of Rome. He began his reign by repressing Servius' supporters. The Senate was halved. Many patricians were expelled as a result of intrigues and denunciations, and the remaining members of the council the new king was in no hurry to gather, preferring to solve all issues independently or with the help of his cronies. In the sphere of foreign policy, Tarquinius Proud broke a lot of wood, preferring the method of the stick and completely forgetting about carrots. The Latin cities remained in the sphere of influence of Rome. But the suppression of any attempts of the Sabines and Etruscans to show a minimum of independence led to the growth of discontent. Brutal rule, unwillingness to reckon with the Senate and aristocratic families, abuse of power and outright autocratic turned against Tarquinius all strata of society. The last drop, overflowed the cup of patience of the Romans, was that the youngest son of the king Tarquinius Sextus inflamed passion for Lucretia, the wife of patrician Tarquinius Collatinus and daughter of consul Spurius Lucretius Tricipatina, and, threatening, committed violence against her. Lucretia told her husband about it and stabbed herself. Lucretia's relatives, Lucius Junius Brutus and Publius Valerius Publicola, carried her body to the Forum and persuaded the citizens to expel the cruel king. Tarquinius the Proud and his sons were expelled from Rome, and they had to flee to Etruria. The exiled king enlisted the support of the Latins and revolted against Rome, but lost in the Battle of Lake Regil, where all his sons died. Tarquinius himself took refuge in the Greek lands, where he died in obscurity a year later. In Rome established a republic, in the early stages brought the state unprecedented prosperity. Curiously, the two consuls elected for a year had truly royal powers, but their reigns were strictly limited, and an article was added to the Roman laws stating that any man who wished to become king of Rome must be killed without trial.